Now in this lesson, we're going to look at the creation of a dynamic block for interior elevation of a door. Now I'm just going to show you how this thing works when it's finished. So I'm just going to go to Insert, type I for my keyboard, and this is the block that we're going to go through on how to create it. So I'm just going to select OK. I place the door at the nearest point at the base of the wall interior elevation. Set the angle of rotation. As you can see that there is a wipeout built inside this block, and it actually hides the line from the chair rail and the base trim. So you don't have to trim lines anymore when you insert the door symbol in interior elevation. You can actually move this door and it will automatically hide the lines behind the door, the wipeout. And you can also pick on the grip of the door and change it to different size. These are the standard size. And also there is a field built inside the door. If I do a redraw now, the field will update to the door size. So I have a number of different width for the door. Do a redraw. That's 860. I can actually change the door height. There's 2 height, but you can add more door height setting if you like. If I do a redraw now, you can see that's updated. I can also flip the door swing, so change the door swing as you like. So this is a lot more convenient than drawing up line by line to create this door elevation symbol. Now first we're going to create a simple door elevation block, which is going to be in the dimension of 915 width, which is a 3-foot door, and the height is going to be 7 feet, and is translate to a metric conversion of 2135. So I'm just going to start the rectangular command, and then starting at 0, 0. And then it's going to go to add 915 millimeter, comma 2135. And now this is my door panel, 3 feet by 7 feet. Now I'm going to offset this by 2 inches, 50 millimeter, to create a door frame. And I'm just going to explode all these poly line, and just draw a line from here to here, and then draw another line from here to here, and I'm going to just trim all these lines and then erase this line. Now I'm going to draw the door swing line, so I'm just going to do line again, snap from here to the midpoint of this line, and then to the midpoint or to the end point of this line. I'm going to change this line type to hidden 2. Now I'm going to create a block. I'm just going to call these door elevation. F1, frame type 1, D1. And it's going to be metric door. And I'm just going to pick point. I want the insertion point to be here. And I'm going to select the object. And I'm going to select OK. And now we have a door block, and the other thing we need to add is add a wipeout in there so that we can hide the line behind the doors if there's a base trim or chair rail, so it will be hidden by the door block. So I'm just going to do the wipeout command, wipeout, and I'm just going to pick the 4 corner to create a wipeout. Now because the wipeout is on top of all the other lines, so it's hiding all the other lines in the block, so I'm just going to pick on the wipeout and then right mouse, draw order, send to the back. Now I'm just going to close the block editor, save change to the block, and this is a block. Now let's test to see if the wipeout is working. I'm just going to draw a line across the block, and I'm going to pick the line, set draw order, send to the back. It's hidden. So the wipeout is working and the dot block is working as intended right now. Now we're going to add the linear parameter to control the door width of this door block. So I'm going to highlight the block, click on it, right mouse, select block editor. And now we're in the block editor and we're going to add a parameter. So linear parameter. Make sure you have the block offering palette on, and you can toggle it on in the ribbon by clicking on this icon here, offering palette. And from the tab parameters, select linear and then pick a point at the lower left corner of the door panel. And I'm going to pick the lower right corner of the door panel and then drag this parameter down just below the door. Now I'm going to change the parameter name. By default, it's going to be called distance 1. So if I highlight this parameters in the property palette, you'll see that the distance name is distance 1. I'm going to change it to width. And the distance description, we're going to call this door width. And then we scroll down and change the value set. Right now there's no category for these parameters, so we're going to click on this distance type, and the drop down we're going to change it to list. And because we already drawn it at 915, there's only one list value in here. So if we click on the field, you see the little button on the right side here. We click on this, you'll open up a dialog box, allow us to enter different list value in there. Now I'm going to enter a number of different door size. I think I'm going to need 610, which is a 2-foot door, and I'm going to enter 765. Enter 815 and enter 865 and enter 1070, and I'm going to enter one more 1220. So these are all the door sizes that I'm probably going to use. I can always add or remove them if I need them later on. I'm going to select OK. And you will see that there's different marking here on the parameters showing that the different sizes I have preset into these parameters. So I'm just going to scroll down further on the property palette. At the bottom here, number of grip 2. I don't want to have 2 grips. I only want to have 1 grip. So 1. Now I only have 1 grip for these parameters, so I would be dragging the grip this way to change it to a different size. Now I have the parameter set up. Now I'm going to need to add an action to work with this parameter. So I'm going to click on the action tab in the block offering palette. I'm going to select the stretch parameter, stretch action, and it'll ask me to select the parameter to associate with this action. I'm just going to pick this parameter here. And it'll prompt you to pick a point to start the action with. So I'm going to pick a point at this triangle here, this grip. And they ask me to select a polygon for the stretching command to work. So I'm just going to pick somewhere up here and then create a rectangular polygon. And they'll ask me select the item I want to stretch inside this polygon. I'm just going to use crossing and select this object here. And then right mouse to enter. And now I want to test the block, so I'm going to click on test block here. It'll toggle me to the test screen, and I can just pick this and stretch it. And it seems like it's working. And I'm going to click on this, close test block. And I'm going to close the block editor to test it again, save the changes, and I can see if I can stretch it inside this environment as well. That seems to be working. Now the next thing we're going to do is add a linear parameter to control the door height. So I'm going to click on the door block again, right mouse, and select block editor. Just like the previous time, we're going to select the parameter palette and going to add another linear parameters. I'm going to pick on this lower left corner of the door panel and pick the upper left corner of the door panel and drag it over here. And I'm going to highlight this parameters rather than let it to be called distance 1. I'm just going to change it to height. And in the distance description, I'm just going to say this is door height. And I'm going to change the value set. Instead of to none, I'm going to select list. I'm going to click on this button here. And I want to be 2145, 7 feet or 8 feet, so it's going to be 2440. So it's going to have 7 feet or 8 feet high. It's like okay. You see there's an increment in here on the parameters, the marking here, so indicate that there's another setting that which I can stretch it to. So I'm going to click on the action tab in the block offering palette. And then select the stretch action again, and then select the height parameter, and then I'm going to pick a point to activate this action here, and they asked me to create a polygon to stretch this door block, so I'm going to make a rectangle polygon here, and I'm going to select the item which is going to be stretched inside this polygon, and then select enter to finish. Now let's also we want to change the parameter so they only have one grip rather than two grips. So we're going to highlight the parameters, and then from the property panel at the bottom here, change the number of grip from 2 to 1. And we can click on the test block button here to test the block, so we can actually click on the block and you see that there is this horizontal stretch function here, and there's another grip up here for vertical stretch function. Now the height is changing, but you can see that when we change the height, the door swing line are not ending at the midpoint of the door anymore. So we need to do some adjustment or to fix this. So we're going to click on close test block. And what we can do is we're going to click on the stretch action again. We're going to click on the height parameter, and again we're going to pick on this triangle here to activate the action, and then we're going to create a polygon. We're just going to pick create a polygon in the middle section of the door, crossing it like this, and then I'm just going to pick on the two diagonal swing line of the door. Okay, and I have another action associated with this parameter, so I'm just going to highlight this stretch 2. I'm going to change it to so this is stretch swing line. Okay, and also the other thing is we need to adjust distance multiplier. So rather than stretch it of every increments in the same way, we're going to change that distance multiplier to be 0.5. Okay, and then we're going to hit enter, hit escape again, and we're going to test this block again. Test block. Now when we stretch it up, you can see that the swing line, the intersection here is stretched by half the amount of increment I put in here. So this is at the midpoint of the door panel. So this is working properly. So you can actually add a multiplier to how much this stretch with the parameter setting. So we're going to do the close the test block, and we're going to close the block editor and test it in the AutoCAD model space environment to make sure it's working properly. And stretch it again this way. Now it seems to be working properly. So we have right now this one block has probably 5 different width and 2 heights. So this one block basically replaced 10 block, which is not dynamic block. Now the next things we're going to do is to add a flip parameter to control the left hand or right hand swing of the door. So again, we're going to highlight the block, and then we're going to right mouse and select block editor to add the block inside the block editor. Now I'm going to go to the parameters tab of the block authoring palette, and I'm going to select the flip parameters. So click on this, and I'm going to snap to the midpoint at the base of the door, and then drag a line down, and make sure you have the shift key, holding down shift key so that it will be directly vertical. And then we're going to pick a point somewhere over here to set the flipped parameter. And now I do not want to have the flip arrow at the bottom of the door like this, so I'm going to click on the flip arrow and then just drag the grip down a little bit further so it's not on the block. And I also want to make this flip line a little bit shorter, so I can just go in here. Once I highlight the parameters, the ending Y, I can just make that into minus 150, so it'll be a lot shorter. Now we're going to add an action to these flip parameters, so we're going to click on the action tab in here and then select the flip action, and I'm going to click on the flip parameters and then select the object that I want to flip. I want to flip everything. I'm just going to type all from the keyboard, or I can just use Windows select everything. Okay, so let's test the block now. So if we click on test block here, and we see our block in the block test environment. So when we highlight the block, we see the flip parameters. So it seems like it's flipping properly. But what if we make it into a different door size? Now when we flip it, actually the door will move, which is not what we want. So we have to do some more adjustments. So just like before, when we actually adjust the door swing line so that it can be move or stretch up incrementally to match the amount of the linear parameters. So we're going to add distance modifier of 0.5. So by the same token, we want to maintain this flip parameter at the midpoint of the door, so that when you flip it, the door won't move. So we're going to close the test block environment. So we back into the block editor environment now. We're just going to do a redraw all. And now we're going to add another action. We're going to add another stretch action. And we're going to click on this linear parameter. Again, we want to use the same point that we activated the door with. And then we're going to select a polygon, just somewhere in the middle here. Oops. We're going to select the polygon again. We're going to do it again. So we're going to use the stretch action. Pick the parameter. Pick the point that we want to use to activate this action. And then we're going to create a polygon somewhere over here, and then we only want to select the icon and that flip lines to be item we want to stretch. Now on this stretch action 2, we're going to rename this action name stretch flip action. we're going to change the distance multiply to be by 0.5. Now let's try this, and we're going to click on test block again. So when we change the door size, you can see that the flip arrows stay more or less in the middle of the door panel. So if we flip them, the door didn't change position. So let's just stretch this up or down. And it seems to be working perfectly. So we're going to click on close test block, and then we're going to click on close block editor, save change, and we can test it again inside this model environment of AutoCAD. So seems to be working. Now the last thing I'm going to do is to add a field into this block to indicate the door sizes. So I'm going to click on the block, right mouse, go to block editor, and I'm going to create a new style called door size. And I already have a door size here, so I create this 75mm, which is fine. And then I'm going to just use M text or D text, depends on what you like, both will work. So I'm just going to use D text because it's probably a simpler entity. So I'm going to pick a point, hit F8, make sure this is, and then pick a point here. And I'm just going to use Control F for my keyboard, and then select object. And pick on this, and I'm going to select the bottom line of the door panel, and then select the length, decimal place, position 0, which is fine, okay. And now I'm going to click somewhere over here, escape. Now I'm going to double click on this text again. I'm going to edit this and put X here, and then Control F again for my keyboard to bring out the field dialog box. I'm going to pick the vertical part of the door line, and again I'm going to select the length and select OK. Now I want to change the style of this text to door style, so rather than standard, I'll change it to door size. I'm going to move it down to here. Move it a little bit over. Now the thing is, you probably need to add this so they will be flipped with the door. So otherwise, it's going to be in a different position once you flip this. So I'm going to click on the flip parameter, right mouse, and then action selection set, modify selection set. And I'm going to add the text as part of the item that's going to be flipped. Enter. Now let's test this out. So I'm going to click on the test block button here. You'll toggle me to the test environment. So if I change the size, the width of the door, if I do a redraw, I can see that it's been changed. But now if I highlight the door, in the parameters of the door, in the property, you see the width is 1070, so it is working properly. So if we test it again, change it to a different size, and then do a redraw, x65, and the door size is x65. Now if we change the door height, and then do a redraw, 2440. So the field is working properly. So if we flip this, we'll go to this side, we flip it, it'll go to this side. So this is the final touch for these door blocks. So I hope you enjoy this video and find it useful. And we'll be doing more video later on, so hopefully we'll get together again soon.